This is the DRF Players Podcast. Here are your hosts, Peter Thomas Fornatel and Jonathan Kinchin.
Oh, yeah. Hello and welcome to the DRF Players Podcast. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatal, back with you for this special edition of the show on February 27th, 2018. I think we're around show 312. Before I even introduce my co-host, I want to give a special shout out to Leticia's class. I have the pleasure of speaking this week at Leticia's class to talk to Perrin and all of her classmates. And I just wanted to say hello and how are you doing to them before we resume our normal broadcast. So with that out of the way, I will bring in my co-host, and he's calling in from the planet Texas. I'm back in the Brooklyn bunker, by the way, first time in a while. And he's back on the planet Texas after a trip to Mexico. He's the people's champ. He's Jonathan Kinchin. JK, what's up?
Wait. You didn't warn me that there was kids listening to the show today. I'm going to have to be extra careful of what I say.
To be honest, JK, it's this fun thing at parent school. I don't know if Austin has something like this where the parents go in and do like a little presentation about what they do. And I thought this was going to be the easiest thing in the world. I thought I was off the hook with my wife, Susan, who works in children's books. I was like, well, she's the no-brainer to head into the class and talk about her profession. I won't have to do it. And Perrin was insistent. No. She wants us both to come in and talk. So I had the idea, wouldn't it be fun, instead of telling them what I do, to show them by playing the first 2 minutes of today's podcast for them. So by the time we get to this equivalent point in the show, I think the tape will be long stopped. So, you can revert to your usual blue routine.
Well, I'll be careful. I'll take it easy today.
How was your weekend in Mexico?
It was fun. It was with the Prince of Keeneland. He's got a nice little situation down there. So lots of food. I was like, I don't know. I mean, I could not stop just getting too full. Where then afterwards I was like sad, like why do I keep doing this to myself? Like why am I doing that? And then I like have these conversations of like, inner conversations trying to tell myself why that's so unsmart to do. And then 3 hours later, the next meal would come and I would do it all over again. So it was just like I was just full the entire time, but we had a great time.
Doesn't sound too bad. I hope you got some good swimming in, burn off some calories that way. I saw your name on a lot of leaderboards this weekend. We'll get to that in a minute, though. We're going to put a pin in that. I want to talk about – there's not a ton to talk about in terms of racing from the weekend, though I know as you were very active in contests, I'm sure you have some thoughts. Actually, I'll start off with this question. I'm going to throw you one of those curveballs that you like so much. So you came on this show with me last week. We talked about the House Hope. We talked about how Irish Warcry was going to be vulnerable down at the rail, talked about how they were going to make him the favorite, maybe even a heavy favorite, and between race design and the layoff and goals down the line, how he was presumably not going to be a good bet at all. Then I noticed you played him in your contest. What gives? You trying to sandbag us here?
No, the workout report came back and it was like B+, B+, A-. And then Jose was riding for the first time from the rail. And I convinced myself that he was going to send, and then he didn't. He broke well, and then he kind of took back and ate dirt, and then exactly what happened. What I predicted was going to happen on the show happened, and But here's the thing: I never would have had an economic model, so it doesn't really matter.
Not a lot.
But yeah, exactly.
The winner of the race economic model, as you mentioned, a result that surprised both you and me. How do you explain it?
He's just a nice horse. It's Chad. I think there was obviously some issues in the race, and so I hadn't watched it back to see if someone was affected. But he just ran well. I mean, he kicked away. I mean, he was game as ever. Him and Irish Warcry kind of were eye to eye for a second. Economic model just drew away. I mean, he's a nice horse. He's trained by a good trainer, and he was ridden by a good rider. So it's just sometimes you have to try to fade these types of horses, and very often this type of thing happens. They just run well.
I just wanted to make fun of you about the Irish Warcry thing and being. I'm glad you pointed it out that you predicted the trip exactly and yet fell into the trap of the trip that you predicted. I just thought it was worth rubbing your face on that for a minute.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. I'm a sucker for workout reports. Everyone knows it. That is in my handicapping circle. It's something that always catches my attention, and it's something that can sometimes lead me to bad decisions, but it also has led me to good ones before. So, kind of live by it, die by it type of deal.
Sure. I mean, on balance, I don't think there are too many better at interpreting and knowing what's actionable in the workout report. You alluded to this, and I'm joking around about this race a little bit at your expense anyway. But, of course, it was really very difficult to watch with Send It In and breaking down and obviously marring the race. It's just one of those things that's the worst part of our game. And there's just really, it's hard. It's not something you can pause on too much, I think, or it would really affect your ability to play the horses. It's you talk to horsemen, you talk to horse players. It's the absolute worst. And I think sometimes, if by talking blithely about a race where that occurs, it appears insensitive or whatever, it's almost because if you don't go by it quickly, you can get yourself stuck in a very negative place mentally.
Yeah, no, of course, and on that topic, I actually wanted your opinion. I saw some chatter after the race. I jumped on Twitter immediately. I know you obviously know, but for those that don't know, the Prince of Keeneland, Jake Ballas is really good friends with Angel Cordero, old family friends. Angel used to ride for Jake's dad, like way back in the day. They became friends, so Jake has naturally got a good relationship, a very close relationship with Johnny Velasquez because of the Angel thing. And so immediately when that happened, we were watching it, and the concern was obviously for the horse as well, but the human interest of it was Johnny, and so we jumped on Twitter to try to, obviously Twitter's the place where you're going to find out, riders standing up, walked off on his own power. And in the meantime of like furiously looking at Twitter, I saw a lot of people kind of criticizing Todd for the horse being run in that spot after such a long layoff. And I found that criticism to be completely unfair. Like, he's a horse that doesn't have any conditions, and he brought him back in a mile race as a prep for things longer. Well, I don't understand what's problematic about that.
No, me neither. I don't get it at all. I think there's a human tendency, and it's an unfortunate human tendency. You see it all the time in sports and horse racing in particular, where something bad happens. In racing's case, sometimes something catastrophic happens. And people are really uncomfortable accepting like the randomness of life and a lot of the terrible things that happen. And they want explanations. And sometimes wanting an explanation means wanting somebody to blame. I mean, you look at Todd Pletcher's training history, you look at, any top trainer, a perfectly logical place to bring a horse back. I mean, I think this is just a terrible random thing that happened, unfortunately, on his watch. It doesn't seem remotely preventable, and horses they are literally born to run. They are meant to race. You put horses out in the field and they will race each other. Like this is what they're here to do. And again, it's just like this terrible cost, and it's very difficult to deal with. But I don't think it's healthy to try to find false people to pin it on. I think it just has to be accepted, and it's harder now than ever. Our friend Craig Bernick has made the point about how different equine, how different racing is as we've gotten farther away from being an agrarian society where people grew up on farms and understand what it means that animals who were there one season are in the freezer the next. It's kind of like the way of the world. That's not the world we live in, really, most of us these days, where our dogs sleep in our beds. And now more than ever, it makes this part of the game really difficult, and it makes the issue of being kind to animals as much as is possible, which I think to a large degree it is in racing, needs to be something that the people pay attention to. Do you have any other thoughts on that before we turn the page?
No, well said.
All right. Other racing on the weekend. How come everybody knew, JK, everybody in the world seemed to know that the Daytona was just a prep for what a view for the kill row coming up in a couple of weeks, and we got suckered in and told people they should bet the horse.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard when you always envision a horse doing something and they show up to do it. It's hard to like get off of the idea. I guess I just forgot that Peter Miller was in the race and that he was going to run 1, 2, 3 in a grade 3 down the hill.
You were looking at the form and you forgot he was in the race. Conquest Tsunami gets it done wire to wire. Any further thoughts on this one?
No, I bet he wishes the Breeders' Cup was at Santa Anita this year with those 3 horses. I thought it was interesting. Calculator took money. He always takes money. Him and Stormy Liberal were both 9-5. So the shocking part, I guess, is that Calculator didn't run a little bit better because it seems like that's who they were betting. When I say, I think in racing we say they a lot, right? And I don't really know who they is, but when they bet, it influences the odds in places I don't think people thought they would go. I've heard our friend Andy Serling say it before. Well, they sure knew, or they bet like they knew that horse was going to get the lead. I don't know who they is, but they are often right.
Yeah, though not in this case with the 5-1 shot getting it done over the 8-5, the 2 8-5s. Do you have one of these you'd like to keep your eye on for this season going forward? One who might be more suited to the turf race at Churchill Downs in the fall than the other two? Or are you just going to be watching them all with interest?
Yeah, I mean, I think Stormy Liberal is the one, obviously, that you want moving forward going at a shorter distance. But Conquest Tsunami ran well. And so I definitely wouldn't knock that one. Calculator just feels like that horse that's going to continue to get bet and let people down more often than not.
All right. What else did you see over the weekend that was deserving of comment? Those were the only 2 I had on my list to talk about, but it seemed like you were in money spots or you didn't quite get the brass ring, but you were up in the breakage money. It looked like Saturday and Sunday in tournaments. So what else did you see this weekend?
Just a lot of like sloppy races at Oaklawn, and it wasn't ideal racing, but it was fun. I mean, I like days like that sometimes, and I hadn't really been playing a lot of contests. Obviously we were getting ready for the NHC and getting ready to announce this exciting contest that we're going to announce on Friday, and I just haven't been playing a lot, so it's kind of fun just to dive back in and get busy and pick up some horses here and there. So it was fun. I had a good time, and like you said, I got a lot of breakage out of the situation. So it's always rewarding when you can hit those breakage spots.
Explain breakage for the newer tournament player, because I've had someone ask me that question before. They say when you get it's a 1 in 10 contest and 33 people shows up, what happens to that extra money from those 3 extra players? Does the tournament site keep the money? And the answer is
no. They give it back to the player. Players that didn't get the seat or didn't get whatever the winner was getting. So I played in a contest on Saturday trying to qualify for the grade 1 gamble at Keeneland, where the top person would get a $3,000 entry into Keeneland's contest and $500 in travel. And I think the ratio was 1 in. I want to say it was 1 in 10. I could be wrong about that.
Yes, 1 in 10.
Anyway, and so, but there was like 17 people in the contest. So obviously, there's not enough for a second seat. So they break up that money that those extra 7 people, contributed. So for third place, I got 1,000 in site credit. So I played in a contest for $400. I didn't get the big thing that I wanted, but I did get my money back and more money to play, moving forward. So it's when you can do those, when you can be alive, we can be drawing live for the big win, but then essentially play for free, which is one of the other reasons I love playing the matchups that kind of match the dollar amount of the qualifier that I'm playing. Because I feel like I can beat one guy more often than I'll beat 17. And so you can usually kind of try to, if you can play for free until you can score, then it's a winning proposition.
It certainly worked for you last year at this time when you got busy and ended up winning your way into several tournaments that will be appearing on the DRF tournaments roster again soon. tournaments like Keeneland, like Del Mar, like the Santa Anita Preakness tournament. Keep your eyes out on the DRF tournaments inventory. Lots of stuff going to be happening there in the coming weeks. All right, if we're done talking about the specifics of races, I think it's time to talk about America's favorite game, JK. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I called Mattel this morning to see if they wanted to pick it up. I don't see why they wouldn't. We've got an app we're working on getting developed that you can play along. A lot of people have been calling me all day. The people that made Angry Birds, Words with Friends, they've all been calling, trying to. The guy from Pokemon, I need to call him back. They want to develop the DRF Players Podcast Bingo, turn it into something real big. See if the world will take hold of it.
Well, and of course we have no stake in it. It's all our man Gene Menez. This is a guy I've never met Gene, I don't think, or if I have, it was briefly. Before we talk about his brilliant invention, I want to talk about him.
Yeah, Gene. I met Gene when Gene reached out. He works at I don't know his exact title, so I don't want to butcher it, but he is a power that be at the Austin magazine, like the Austin monthly or Austin Living or whatever it is, and he also does a division of like a kind of like a real estate design deal. And so when he reached out to me to do a piece when I had my first kind of run at the NHC, I don't know if people have seen that picture where there's like a horse. I'm like in a field. There's a horse looking over my shoulder while I'm on my computer. So I met Gene there, and he listens to the show, and we've seen Gene at random racing events. And he came up with this bingo, which is absolutely hilarious. I saw it on the plane, and I just was like laughing out loud. The guy next to me was clearly trying to figure out what the heck was wrong with me, and so I thought it was really, really funny, and he nailed it. I mean, he nailed every single one of them.
It is brilliant. We will talk about. I don't want to give away the whole thing. Folks can go on Twitter and check it out. You can follow Gene at Gene Menez. That's GeneMenez. You can find it in our timelines too, of course. Some of these are just incredible. My wife Susan was very happy that both Muggs and Perrin made the bingo. That was very cool. Dodgy Hotel Wi-Fi making an appearance made me very happy. Jonathan forgetting to unmute was another one of my favorites. Then you had, de rigueur ones like Crush Their Souls and making fun of my pronunciation of certain 2-year-old stakes races. That was great. Getting on me for my over-plugging of Betting with an Edge. That was a good one. Your travel woes, the Eddie Logan suite. Saratoga Special gets a call. So many good ones here. I do have 2 or 3, though, that we need to, before the game, before they roll out the app, I think we need to consider getting involved. But what were some of your favorites on here?
Oh, yeah. I love obviously the ones that are making fun of me. The King's Bishop. I mean, the Alan Jefferson's, that one's pretty good. Because I swear I do that all the time.
I've done it too. That's both of us.
And then the where's Eric Bialik when you need him? Jonathan attempts math and comma fails.
I've read it 18 times and it still makes me laugh. All right. If there's one that I would call an oversight, no silver wig in the bingo, JK. What's up with that?
The silver wig would be great. And then we can't forget Eric Bialik's favorite thing to point out is when you say when you give your Rob Dove tagline.
One of the top 10 pro punters in the UK today. More obscure, but that one could make it. The other one I would have loved. I mean, just because hey, he's won an Eclipse Award. What have we ever done? Maybe a shout out for producer Craig. Would that have also made sense on here?
Absolutely.
Lots of fun stuff in the bingo. Check it out. It's well designed too. And folks can follow along and some other sick person. Obviously, that last conversation doesn't count. But so we'll putting that to the side. Start the bingo now. We'll see. We'll send out cards. We'll see who wins.
You should just. We should just. I'm volunteering a book from you, Pete. I don't care if you can turn one in. Completed a bingo with dates, so you just put the date on the thing.
And timestamp. Maybe we could include it in the best of. This could be a segment for the best of.
Date and timestamp of a completed one of these player podcast bingos. Pete's going to send you a free copy of Betting with an edge.
And there's your first one. There's your free square right there. Betting with an edge plug. We'll let you have that one, folks, as you go forward. All right. What else should we talk about today? We had a bunch of questions come in. We could get to those. We could talk more general stuff. We've got Scotty McKeever coming up in a few minutes. I should have mentioned that at the top of the show. Scotty, who just started playing in contests and in just a few months has run third in the Pegasus Betting Challenge, nearly winning, and then comes back in the $500 Santa Anita contest over the weekend, JK, and takes top honors there. It reminds me like a few years ago when this kid named Jonathan Kinchin came on the scene.
Yeah, well, yeah, we'll see. It took me a little bit longer to get going than it took him, but yeah, definitely going in the right direction. Seems like we'll see his name some more. It sounds like he's going to continue to participate in events. He mentioned the Stronach Group's Ultimate Betting Challenge that you can either play from Santa Anita and or Gulfstream, not and or, I guess, or Gulfstream. You couldn't play from both, I don't think.
If you can figure out how to be in both places at once, though, you do get extra points for that.
Absolutely, you can qualify. That's one of the events I try to qualify for this weekend, and we'll try next weekend as well. Is that event? We'll be out there at Santa Anita hanging out. So yeah, no, it should be fun, and I think Scotty will be seen again soon.
Excellent, and you'll be seen again a little bit later in this podcast. We'll get to him in about 10 minutes. We had a tournament question come in, JK. Maybe that's the next logical place to go. This is from our man Drew, who's always seeming to be asking the excellent questions. He wants to know what we think is a better path to the grade 1 gamble. Is it better to buy into the $22 per entry, the $95, or the $410? Wants to talk about what factors would go into which event would be right to you, your skill level, how much time you have, your skill in head-to-heads, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I always lean towards the ones that need the events that have lower ratios. That's what I prefer. And then my style fits that better. And those lower ratio events, at least 3 times this weekend, a horse that was like 7 or 8 to 1 would win, and no one would have it. And I like events like that because, I feel like I do better in those. And so I'm willing to pay that higher dollar amount in order to avoid some of the craziness that comes with it.
Now, I think it's safe to say that the reason that's the case for you is your style so geared towards picking winners. You do come up with long shots, but you're first and foremost, you're super concerned. You're never playing the board. You're looking at races and you're trying to pick winners. For what type of player does it make sense to either choose a different ratio or to start one's journey earlier? I mean, actually, the ratios are pretty good in the $22 events. In fact, aren't they like? Do you even get those down to 1 in 5?
No, they're about the same. The thing is like, here's what I think tournament players that play online and on DRF tournaments should think about is how many $22 events do you have to play in before you qualify for the 95? How many $95 events do you play in till you actually qualify for the 410? Because what I think happens a lot of times is like we end up thinking to ourselves like, oh, I don't want to spend the 95. I'll just spend 22 today. Oh, I'll spend 22 tomorrow, and then the next day, and then the next day, and the next thing you know, you spent 100 playing 4 events, and you could have just spent the 95 once and had that one shot. So that's just my betting personality. I know that's not everyone's. But I think you need to ask yourself, what's your strike rate? Like, how often do you find yourself at the top of those leaderboards? Do you win the $30, $40 games, or are you the guy that wins when it's 70 or 80? So, if it's 70 or 80, I think you might want to, probably play the lower ones to try to get in. It's a tricky question.
It is. I think another way to look at it is you got to look at what your goals are. For me, I might be more interested in playing in those weekday events if it doesn't feel like work. If it's actually fun if playing in that $22 contest is what's going to give me my action on a Thursday and keep me paying attention and maybe making my trip notes or just getting stuck in and I'm able to watch and enjoy the races as they go, I'm going to be more inclined to do that. If that's going to be like work and it's not going to contribute any fun or any action, I'd be more inclined to just go up the ladder. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I like I said, I like to play in events that have a matchup that are equal to that dollar amount, and just go with the math that I have a good shot of beating one guy, and if I have a good day, I can beat 10 guys. And then if I can just win one of those, well, I guess you'd have to win both. If you won a whole tournament, you're probably going to win a head-to-head. That's the approach that I like and trying to get in there, because mistakes that I made is not having good record keeping when I first started playing in these contests. Was I would spend, trying to qualify for Keeneland, I'd mess around and spend $3,000 trying to qualify for the $3,000 event. If you don't do it with a little bit more of a plan, have an idea of what it is you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and I think that's right. Whatever the right answer will become evident to you if you look honestly at what your own numbers tell you about your strike rate, and you also look very closely at what your goals are. All right, we got some good racing coming up this weekend. We'll spend some time on that on Friday's show for sure. We got the Fountain of Youth Stakes. I'm getting to write this one up for the deeper look, the Triple Crown prep guide situation, those longer versions of the closer looks that go along with the Derby countdown stuff. So I'll get a chance to write about Good Magic and Free Drop Billy and all the rest. What are you hearing about any of those horses and how they're doing, or have you thought about this race or read anything about it yet that's of interest? Anything you could give me to help me out before I put pen to paper?
And look, this isn't going to be a bingo square, so don't even try to get me, because I'm not saying a horse's name and not knowing it. I'm trying to remember. I'm pretty sure, and I'm talking slow to try to find it. I believe
here we go.
That Good Magic has been working with Economic Model, and I stalled long enough to confirm that is true. So look at the work. If you look at the workout report from Saturday on DRF Clocker Report, it shows that Good Magic has been working with Economic Model. So I would say that's a pretty good indicator of how Good Magic is coming back into this. He's been working with an older horse that just won a Grade 3 race. So excited to watch him come back. Should be a ton of fun.
Yeah, it seems to me on paper, just from who the probables are, like it's shaping up to be a match between Good Magic and Free Drop Billy. Free Drop Billy with the race under his girth, and presumably considerably better price. Maybe the way I'm leaning towards pointing people in that piece. But we'll wait till the PPs come out and do the race for real on Friday.
Audible, is he waiting for a different spot?
I didn't see Audible among the probables.
Okay, and then I don't know if you got a chance, and I'm sure you hadn't seen it yet, but you can find on the interwebs Bolt Doro's last work, and I think you'll find it interesting with your opinion of how he broke from the gate and kind of what direction that was leading you. This was a gate work, and I think you'll be interested to see how he broke in this one.
Definitely. What was your thought on the work in general? I mean, my gut is the same as when we talked about him a couple of weeks ago on the show. I just feel like it's so hard to play catch up. It just seems like the road to the Triple Crown is littered with horses who tried to do what he's doing and can never quite get back up into gear in time. And I almost want them not to rush him, so maybe they have something later in the year. But I'm sure the horse will tell him what to do.
Oh, I love watching workouts, and one of the things that my amateur eye can see is what the rider is doing with his hands. And that's the best way to say this. At any point, if the rider's hands end up behind him, that's not really something that I would consider a great work. It seems like they're playing catch up.
That you're saying that he was being vigorously asked in the work? Yeah,
I mean, he got some right-handers in the race, and it's not what you expect to see from a Grade 1 winner in the morning.
No, that does sound like catch up, and I just hope that Cooler heads prevail there. All right, a couple of quick notes from old shows we'll get to, and then we'll bring in Scotty. We have an update from Kyle, who is the one who asked us about the Wise Guy horses last week. Remember the Wise Guy contest horses? You notice everybody's playing your horse, and you have to decide if you want to continue with the horse in the all-in contest or get off it. Well, he ended up getting off the 6-1, thinking the horse was going to be about 3-1. Then got annoyed at himself when he saw the horse before post drift to 7-1. Then he felt great when the horse didn't run, and then he also noticed that in his 11-person tournament, 5 of them had picked the Wise Guy horse. I thought that was a great story.
Absolutely, that's awesome. Yeah, when you can dodge those bullets in contests, I think it gives you a real big edge. Is predicting what everyone else is going to do in the contest, but then also predicting what the toad is going to do, and I think or what they are going to do. And I think the best thing if you can, the best way to learn that tool and to have that tool is to continue to play in those Wednesday, Thursday, Friday cheap feeders that we were talking about earlier, those $22 things where it really just kind of gives you some muscle memory and identifying those situations.
Boy, this really is like the DRF Tournaments version of the podcast. But I guess, in a sense, every podcast is the DRF Tournaments version of the podcast. It's why we're here, after all, as in, in the employ of DRF, in my case. And, let me ask you this one. Adam passed along that the winner of last week's 1,500 runner free roll played all the ones like our man Hurricane Anthony Robb. JK, is it possible that there's anything to this idea of playing all the ones? And before you answer, remember how certain tracks were playing last Monday.
Yeah, well, I think exactly. I mean, I think that what happened at Oaklawn probably had a lot to do with that. But at the same time, I think there probably is something to do with it, right? I mean, if they're drawn inside, they're going to save ground, which obviously there's certain scenarios in which that's not ideal. If they're drawn inside, they're typically going to be asked to run from the gate. There's a lot of really good reasons why it makes sense. It's also harder to do all of any number above really the 5 or the 6 because of scratches and short fields. So I played in a free contest not too long ago, and I wanted to pick all of the 10s, but I couldn't because obviously there's not a 10 in every race. So then I did all of the 2s, but then there was a scratch. So it was tough, but I did okay actually. I made like $40 just picking all the 2s.
I do think all the ones, you're going to have a lot higher strike rate with your all the one strategy when you get a track like the paved highway. I still haven't done the bias work myself on it, but the paved highway that I've heard Oaklawn was back on that Monday. One more, we'll address it quickly. This one came in from Twitter. Listener says, instead of hitting my double with martini glass, darn that Parker, I ended up wasting my money and my will to wager on an earlier race on a 2-1 shot. Good handicapping, terrible betting. Any advice?
Yeah, I mean, what you're doing is the advice, right? Is like that's the advice is make mistakes and then evaluate them and then do things different moving forward, right? We have a friend that I love that hits me with the same jazz all the time. Oh, I'm such a good handicapper. I'm such a bad bettor. Well, then stop being a bad bettor, right? Like work at your whatever you did to become a good handicapper. You need to do the same things to become a better bettor, right? You need to evaluate what it is that you're doing. Find creative and more efficient ways to place your wagers. If you're betting win bets and you're getting beat, then you need to look at front and back wheeling and exactas. If you're playing all of these multi-race bets and getting nailed all the time, then maybe you need to try doubles instead of pick 3s, pick 4s, and pick 6s. You have to change things, and the first step of changing things is like asking the question, like what can I do differently? And I think you're doing it. It's just you just have to change things up and learn new things. I mean, that's the best answer I can give.
I love it. There's more that I could add about coming up with a budget and trying to think about the day holistically early on. But you know what? I think we put a pin in that. That's a good enough question to come back to on Friday's show or some other show in the near future. I think it's time to go to the audio tape here and bring in our very special guest. And now we'd like to welcome to the DRF Players Podcast for his first ever visit, fresh off a win at the Santa Anita tournament over the weekend, their sort of version of a low roller tournament, I guess, low roller live bankroll, Scotty McKeever. Scotty, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, guys. How are you?
Doing well. Great to have you on the show. Been seeing your name on an awful lot of leaderboards lately in the contest world. Before we talk about contests, though, JK and I wanted to hear a little bit about your background, how you got involved in horse racing in the first place.
So the first time I went was to Fairfax Park. A friend of mine worked for Mel Studi in Pomona, California, and defunct now, but great small track. And I went there for the first time, and he said, "We're gonna bet an exacta box on a couple of Mel's horses." I'm like, "Well, what's an exacta box?" And anyways, we ended up winning that. Mel's horses came in first and second, and I was hooked from there. I think I bet $10 and won $200, and the rest was history.
Scotty, so I did a little Googling, prior to having you on to see, and I stumbled across this idea that the Pegasus betting challenge, was that your first handicapping contest that you played in?
It was my first tournament, first cash tournament and first tournament. So it was new for me. I started a new company called equineedge.com that should launch sometime in April or May of this year. And we thought we'd try it out. And it seemed to work well. It works well for my style as well. The cash tournaments do. And because I'm trying to win always. I'm just not afraid. And I think that plays well when you're not afraid.
Let's talk a little bit about Equine Edge. From what I understand, it's some sort of computer modeling approach to playing the races, but one that the public will be able to participate in as well, as opposed to something that's behind a locked door.
Yeah, it's machine learning it's not new, but it's more advanced now. So it's an algorithm, and our algorithm, what it does, it gives the overall win percentage chance for every horse in the race around the country and every race. And it wins about 36% of the time, the top pick. So I don't even like calling it a pick, guys. It's the top win percentage. And the reason is it's really important to me that the numbers are subjective, because you want to empower people and teach them, but you want to give them advantage, a quick advantage as well. And so that's what these numbers do. And it's designed for both beginners and experienced handicappers. And I use this tool for both tournaments.
That's incredible. I love it. Where did you learn I've heard stories about ancient academic papers that folks have used to start off with their own machine learning type handicapping systems. Of course, these are at the root of what the famous computer groups use internationally. How did you discover this and develop it?
Well, I love the game. I'm passionate, like all of us are, guys. And so I started probably about 10 years ago with a company called myhorseplayer.com. It didn't work out like I had hoped. Made a few mistakes. I learned some lessons, and I brought it back here to equineedge.com. And from the things that I learned, I decided I used to have what was called class numbers, because I'm more of a class player than I'm a speed player. But people really didn't know what a class number was, but they do know what win percentages are. And so it changed that a little bit, put win percentages on there. The system it looks at distance, competition of a race. The thing is we're not computers, so we can't remember everything. I mean, if you think about it, how many times do we come back after a race is over and go, I missed that. I could have had that. Not a surprise. Most of the time, very few times do we say, I still couldn't have had that horse. I mean, it happens, but very rarely. And so this is what the system is designed to do. It takes millions of combinations of things at horse racing, trouble a horse might have had, breeding. It also does first-time starters, which is my favorite. And that's what I used to win the Santa Anita tournament.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about if you can remember back to the Pegasus and also the Santa Anita contest. We love Tales from the Track on the podcast here. So what were kind of some of the big scores, the big pieces that got you climbing up the leaderboard in both of those contests that you participated in?
So I was doing well. As a matter of fact, I was the only player in that contest to play every race. And, in retrospect, I probably it was an error to do that. But I felt like I had an advantage. And so I was doing very well in the beginning. I was at the top of the leaderboard. And then I lost 5 races in a row. And I'm very aggressive. So I'm betting a big part of my bankroll. But one race stuck out to me. One of my long shots was 35-1, and it popped up in my system because my system also looks at long shots, the best possible odds long shots. And it popped up this horse that was 35-1, and my top pick was 3-1. And so I did a $500 exacta, the 3-1 to the 35 shot, and it came in and paid me $60,000. And I think I was like probably bottom 20 of the leaderboard at the time.
One big hit sometimes is all it takes in the contest. I assume you're obviously talking about the Pegasus with that one. What was the big hit this last weekend at Santa Anita?
So the way I play, since I'm very aggressive, I stick to my same pattern, and usually I'll get one hit usually or 2 hits during that tournament, and that happened to me in Santa Anita. I hadn't hit anything the entire time. My top picks were winning, but I couldn't connect on exactas and trifectas, which is what I play during those tournaments. And in the 8th race at Santa Anita, the first-time starter popped up that met my requirements that I liked, and it was the 7 horse in that race who ended up going off at, I want to say 35-1 as well for Jeff Bondy. And I liked it, but I liked the 10 horse. That was my top pick. So the first thing I do, guys, is I find a key single. First thing I have to do. And if I have that key single, then I'm looking for a long shot, a key long shot or 2, and I place them in the 2nd and 3rd spots. Well, in this situation, I love the 10. He was always going to be on the top. And then I keyed the 7 horse. I didn't have much money left. I think I had $50 in my bankroll left. As a matter of fact, $51 to be exact. And I took that $51 and I did an ice-cold trifecta, the 10 with the 7, and I liked the 3 horse for 3rd. The 3 came out of the same race as the 10. I watched the video on that, and it came in, and it paid just a little bit over $10,000.
That's pretty impressive. So your handicapping contest future moving forward, do you have some stuff on the schedule you're excited about participating in, or do you think you're gonna kind of switch your focus back to your just normal cash player? Have you found a newfound love?
Well, I'm going to play in the UBC on March 11th at Santa Anita for sure. I'm certainly going to play in the cash tournaments from now on, so I should be a regular in those. I did play in the NHC. I tried that for the first time and failed miserably. But it's a different format. I mean, all these tracks, all these races coming up at once. I wasn't prepared for that. See, when I played the tournaments at Santa Anita and also at the Pegasus, I didn't handicap prior. I just showed up and started playing. It's a lot easier for me to play 1 or 2 tracks with my system than it was for the NHC. So I'm tweaking that a little bit. Plan on entering the NHC. Hopefully I can qualify and give it another try because I didn't like the result of it. I bombed.
It's hard. It's a different type of test. So many different tests in the handicapping contest world. Hoping to see your name more and more on DRF tournaments as well. While we're talking about tournaments, I'd love for you to discuss what the appeal is. Why, after being a horse player for so many years, did you first decide to participate in the Pegasus, and why are you interested in having contests as a big part of your game going forward?
Well, I wish I would have known that these cash style tournaments played towards my personal style a long time ago. That would have been helpful, but I don't know. I just was one of those players that would play exactas and trifectas, and I would play verticals, all the vertical bets pretty much on races, and I'd just sit at home or I'd go to Santa Anita. It's my favorite track, and I would just play. And I didn't really think about the tournaments. And but then when we came up with Equine Edge, I wanted to test it out under the tournament format, and it seemed to play well towards my style and towards the win percentages. Because it takes a long time to handicap a race. Well, for me, it doesn't take a long time because what my program does, it eliminates the horses that don't have a very good chance of winning, guys. So I can cross off those horses before I even begin handicapping, and now I'm only handicapping, maybe a third of the field, maybe half of the field. So that really is an advantage when races are coming up on top of each other fast, where you could just look at the contenders and instead of the horses that have a very small chance of winning. And that's a big advantage.
Do you envision, have you played in multiple $2 mythical win place contests? Even, obviously the NHC is tough because it's, like you said, it's races right on top of each other. How is your style and your system kind of worked in a format where there's, 12 races you have to look at and here you go?
Yeah, good question. So, it didn't work the first time. It's not that my system and myself didn't have the horses, but trying to time them, which ones to play. So, of course, you're zigging and zagging. One of my top horses would win, but I didn't have it, and then I would bet the next one, and it was reacting. So, I think with the NHC format, with all those races coming up as far as the fictitious $2 to win in place, it doesn't play well for me because the exactas and trifectas and getting the big odds on those scores, that seems to play well for me. Even if I lose 6 or 7 in a row, I'm still in it because I can make a score like that. So on $50, like $10,000, the $500 bet that I made in the Pegasus paid $60,000. So I'm always in those types of tournaments. On the $2 win in place, you need to prepare well ahead of time. And kind of have an idea of who you want to play. And, and then, $2 to win in place and they cap it out at 20 to 1. That makes it tough. So I think experienced players have a big advantage. It could take me time to get there, but we're certainly going to learn from the past experience in last tournament.
So I definitely understand how a computer can look at when there's a lot of data established on horses and come up with that winning percentage you described. What kind of factors is the model looking at for a maiden race?
So it's without giving out too much of that, that's my favorite part of the program is the first-time starter program, because every horse player I talk to says it's impossible to judge a horse that's never run before. I understand. But the machine learning algorithms are incredible, guys. And so over the years, I've taken notes on first-time starters and come up with a program. So besides breeding, which you can do, but that's not enough, there's a certain pattern that I look for in first-time starters. And one of the patterns is I like to see challenging a first-time starter. I want to see different patterns. I want to see a fast 5 work, and then I want to see a slow 4 furlong work. I want to see that. And I look for stuff like that. I want to see a horse a little bit earlier at their 3/8 works to make sure that they're somewhat fit, ready to go, because it's hard to have a horse completely fit to get to the races first time out. So, because these first time starters only win about 9.5% of the time in races, so you have to know which ones have a chance. And that first time starter, the Jeff Bondi horse, is what won me the Santa Anita tournament.
That's great. Now, without giving away any particulars, are you looking at any subjective workout information, or is it all about the patterns of the workouts when you talk about that stuff?
That's it. Just the patterns of the workouts, a little bit of the breeding, but the pattern of the workout really is the biggest thing I look for. And you don't want to see too slow works, although Steve Miotti is the one anomaly in this one. I swear, every time I see a Steve Miotti horse, I cringe, because those works could not be any slower, and he can get these horses to win. But by the most part, there seems to be a pattern with these first-time starters that have a chance of winning.
That's interesting. And if I veer too far into stuff you don't want to talk about, feel free to shut me down. I won't be offended. But I would have guessed that different trainers have different patterns along the lines of what you were saying with Miotti. But you're looking for something that's a little more universal, or are you customizing it to which barn the first-time starter is from?
Well, great question as well. No, there is a pattern for each trainer, and the thing is we can't pick up on all that stuff. Maybe we can pick up on 1 or 2 trainers, but the machine learning system can pick up on all those patterns, and that's what it does. And the way that works is I meet with my programmer probably once every 2 days. We spend 2 hours talking, and I, prior to that, had gone over a bunch of horses and put notes on each one and why they won, why they shouldn't have been such a high win percentage. And then he puts that in and he writes that code into the machine learning. And then it goes over and looks for patterns, and then it spits back to us and shows us the result. Was that a good line of code? Did it like that? Did it improve the algorithm? So it's actually that quick. So we are on the weekly improving our algorithm. So we think it's possible in the next year or two to actually get to a win percentage of 40%.
That's amazing. And when you talk about win percentage, you mean the top pick winning that amount of the time.
The top pick winning the amount of time. That's correct. Right now we're at 36%. It's not a flat bet profit yet, but it doesn't need to be, because it quickly gives you the contenders against the pretenders. I mean, think about this. I use the racing form with my tools. That's what I use. So the first thing I do is I look at my win percentages for a race, and I cross off all the low numbers that have a very little chance of winning. So that's the first thing I do. Then it leaves me with a lot less horses to handicap, cuts my handicapping time in half, and then it gave me a huge advantage in the tournament. And then from there, the system also tells me the long shots that have a chance, so I identify those, and that's pretty much all I do. That's what I use for my handicapping.
You talked before about how your original approach to the game was more class-based. Now that you've incorporated all this machine learning stuff, how important is class to you in the modern game?
It's both. I tell you what, guys, I respect speed a lot more. I actually respect the buyer number a lot more than I ever thought. As a matter of fact, the Andrew Buyer number was well ahead of its time. And if you think about it, even in the racing form that I use daily, that cuts the handicapping time as well, right? Because people count on that. They're like, sometimes you don't want to look at all the details of the racing form. For me, it settles me, it relaxes me. I like looking at the form, but sometimes we're in a hurry and we don't have time to process all that information. And when you look at the buyer, you can kind of see the higher numbers, see a trend, maybe there's a pattern of improvement. That's what I like about the buyer so much. But that only judges the past races. The win percentage judges the horse itself in that given race. And that's the type of tool that we need also, that gives people confidence, they trust in it, and they can do it quickly, and that helps you process information a lot faster and determining which horse you want to play.
Well, I love what you're saying. I've talked to Tony Joe before, who's another, computer-oriented player, about this idea of man plus machine, that you use the machine as a tool to put you on the right path. And then you talk about going in the contest and having to, look at the form and make your final decisions. I think it's fascinating. And I definitely think it's an approach that has legs for 2018 in the future. I'm going to ask you a very difficult question, though, and I warn you in advance. This is my, not trying to be cheeky with you, but it's just, it's one that you're going to hear a lot anyway. So, and you've probably heard it already. What you're doing is so sophisticated and so powerful. Why would you want to, if you can just use this money to gamble, which you're obviously very successful at, why would you have a component of this that's available to the public?
Guys, I love the question, by the way, and I fought with that. Okay, we have many scenarios in which we have positive ROI. Of course, we can run statistics. We've probably got 30 or 40 of them. It's just not who I am. I want to share this with the public. I want to make a difference in horse racing. And if we're going to attract millennials to this game, we have got to give them information they can process fast, because with smartphones and information at your fingertips, they're not going to read the form like we do traditionally. They'll look at it, but in addition to fast information that they can process quickly and have a fighting chance of winning. And that is the only way we're going to attract these millennials.
I love it, and I couldn't agree more. Before I let you go, I just want you to talk a little bit about the broadcasting work that you do.
So as I started getting into broadcasting, well, Dave Weaver's a good friend of mine, and he's like, "Hey, how would you like to be a guest on the show?" And so they invite me into the studio. I'm with Simon Bray, Todd Schrupp, Matt Carruthers, and I'm on the desk with the three of them, of course, and I am a nervous wreck. And nervous is an understatement of what I was, guys, because I don't even like taking a picture with a camera, let alone being on live TV with these guys I've been watching for 25 years. And I just gave away my age. I'm very old. Anyway, so I'm there, and I'm also very opinionated, and I think that's what you need to be not a host, but an analyst. And so I'm sitting next to Simon, and I give out a horse. I remember at Hawthorne, like it was yesterday, 7-1, and I guaranteed its win. And we went to
that sounds like something Jonathan Kinchin would do.
Well, listen, Simon essentially punched me under the desk, and then during commercial break, he said, "Are you nuts?" He said, if this horse loses, you are going to get crucified. So, and we're watching this race. This horse is coming down the stretch, and this horse is behind a wall of horses, and I can see he's got a lot of horses, and I am sweating. I'm like, oh, my God, please get up. And the horse got up, and I never did that again.
Saved your bacon.
Good.
Oh, that's great stuff. And now folks who are interested in more from Scotty can follow on Twitter. Remind us of that handle again.
All right. It's at ScottyPick6 if you'd like to follow me on Twitter. And I just love handicapping, and I love the game. So I give out my picks all the time. It's just something I do because I just enjoy doing it, and I want to see people win. And also the new company, which is going to launch, and the tools will be available to everybody. Hopefully April, maybe May. It's called equineedge.com, and you can go there as well and sign up. And I currently give free picks at one track on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. And so with that free subscription, you get that. I appreciate the plug, guys.
Hey, no problem at all. Definitely have sympathy for the idea of doing creative things to make racing appealing to a younger audience. And we love the fact that you're still using the racing form while doing it. I think that's definitely the way to maximize the edge you're going to get. Scotty McKeever, he's a sensation in the tournament world. Big run at the Pegasus. Where'd you end up there again?
Got third in the Pegasus, and that's another story. I'm not happy about that as well.
Eddie Olczyk's win was your gain, was your loss, I guess.
Eddie killed me. He killed me. Thanks a lot, Eddie.
You couldn't get beat by a nicer guy, I'll tell you that much. But
I hear that.
And then also the big run, the big win at Santa Anita last weekend. We'll be looking for your name on the leaderboard. Thanks for joining us today.
All right. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
There you have it from Scotty McKeever. That was an interesting conversation. We've heard about these computer players and their approaches. Really cool to get one to open up about the techniques involved. I look forward to talking to him more in the future about machine learning and computer play and all that other stuff. And I want to thank him very much for taking the time out of his day to join us. And we'll definitely keep an eye on his progress throughout the year and check back in with him at some point. I also want to thank Jonathan Kinchin, of course, for calling in, joining us from Planet Texas. While we're thanking people from Planet Texas, Gene Menez and that wonderful DRF Players Podcast Bingo. I noticed we had another mark of a square during that interview. That one counts as well. Have fun with that. Look forward to giving a copy of Betting with an Edge to the first person who completes 5 in a row on DRF Players Podcast Bingo. You can find the cards on Twitter. You can check my timeline or follow Gene to do that. I want to thank producer Craig and producer AJ, Travis Stone for his vocal stylings in the voiceover at the start, and of course, Willie Nile. You can find more of his music at willienile.com. Most of all, I want to thank all of you for listening. We will be back on Friday. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatal. May you win all your photos.